In this hour, we're talking about reparations, and specifically this recent report out of San Francisco that its Reparations Advisory Committee has come up with this determination that African Americans in San Francisco that were born in the city during a certain time period and those that have lived in the city for a certain amount of time should receive $5 million apiece in reparations. Now, slavery was never legal in San Francisco, but reparations activists say the city imposed decades of racist policies that economically harmed Black residents. The executive director or the head of this Reparations Advisory Committee also said there wasn't a math formula used in getting to the $5 million number. He says it was a journey for the committee towards what could represent a significant enough investment in families to put them on the path to economic well-being, growth, and vitality that chattel slavery and all the policies that flowed from it destroyed. I want to bring my guests on. First, Dr. Cheryl Davis. She's Executive Director of the Human Rights Division in San Francisco. Welcome, Dr. Davis.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So glad you're here. And also I want to bring on Melanie Collette. Melanie is a political commentator. Welcome, Melanie.
Thank you for having me.
Cheryl, I want to start with you. Let's take a step back. And can you just give us the most basic definition of reparations and then explain what the committee in San Francisco, what their process was and how they got to the $5 million number? We know that the lead of that committee says it was a journey, but help us understand who's qualifying or may qualify, because y'all may be getting a bunch of folks trying to get on an airplane and fly to San Francisco trying to get that $5 million check. And that's not going to be how it works. So give us a little education on what you guys have been doing in San Francisco around reparations.
Yeah, so the committee was launched. The president at the time of the Board of Supervisors, the one Black person on the Board of Supervisors for the city, San Francisco's a city and county, created this body, legislated it, 15-member body, went through a process. And this body is different than a lot of other ones where it's focused on lived experience. And so there's somebody who was formerly homeless, someone who has been involved in lived in public housing, right? So they've got all these things that are connected or associated with the experience of Black folks in San Francisco. It's funny you say that about like who qualifies, because I've been in San Francisco for almost 30 years and I am not going to qualify. Somebody sent me sent me a direct message the other day, talking about very self-serving that you proposed $5 million. First off, I didn't propose it. And second off, it's not self-serving. I can't get money because it's about a very specific time period in San Francisco. It's about when some of the most kind of atrocious redevelopment agency happenings were going on. And so folks who lived here during the time of the most gentrification that we saw during that period of time. And so during the 50s, 60s is when we saw a lot of Black folks being pushed out of their housing. And so that was something that they wanted to target and think about in terms of that timeline. Other things that are relevant to that are having been Black for more than a year. So also this idea that folks don't just all of a sudden realize and remember that they are a descendant of slaves or that they are Black, but that you have to have had it for X amount of years. 10 years, I believe, is where they landed with that. There's also these other proxies that we've used, as you know, Prop 209 in California. Like, we haven't always been able to talk about doing something for folks because they were Black, but we know that the education system, incarceration, other things that have been proxy for how Black people haven't had access to resources and money. So those are other things that are listed in there. And then I would say this has been the hardest part in terms of justifying the $5 million in that conversation. And the neighborhood where, for folks who are familiar with San Francisco, where the painted ladies, the iconic houses that are in San Francisco that are on the postcards, and some folks refer to it as the place where the Full House is in San Francisco. If somebody, that neighborhood around there and where those houses were was Black, pre-redevelopment agency. And if we were going to, in the name of reparations, in the name of repair, in the name of getting people back to where they would have been if the harm hadn't been done, if we were going to give people the opportunity to purchase the homes that they were pushed out of or the homes that were demolished and not rebuilt, those homes are anywhere between $3 and $4 million in those neighborhoods where Black folks were moved from. So just starting with purchasing one of the existing homes, not to mention if you were going to try and get a lot and rebuild it. So in the name of reparations, just getting enough money to purchase the home is already a huge piece of the formula if we are talking about the cost to actually begin to do repair. It has nothing to do with mental health or education or even just paying your bills every day.
Let me ask you this. One of the criteria that I saw, Cheryl, was that if you were personally or the direct descendant of someone incarcerated by the failed war on drugs. So that could be a white person, right? That could be a Latino person. That could be an Asian person. Don't have to be a Black person that was directly or a descendant of someone incarcerated by the war on drugs. Does that then make that person, despite them not being Black, would they then be eligible?
So that's the first go around of that list. And what's going to happen is that you're going to have to be one thing and something else, right? And so the one thing that everybody's going to need to do is be Black. But I think we are also still navigating Prop 209. And once this goes to the Board of Supervisors, when they get ready to vote on it, the city attorney's office is going to tell them what is actually something that they can move forward without the city being worried about being sued.
So help us understand what's going to happen next. So the advisory committee has made the recommendation and is going to go to your Board of Supervisors. And how many people sit on your board?
So this is the draft. They'll do March 14th. There'll be a hearing for the supervisors, the Board of Supervisors. There are 11 supervisors representing 11 districts around the city. And that draft recommendations will go before that body on March 14th. The supervisors will talk about like whether they accept, whether they want them to be modified. Then the committee will spend the next few months tweaking and doing more research and fine-tuning the recommendations and fine-tuning the eligibility, and then come back in June to present to the board. And then at that point, the board will make a decision about like how to move this document forward.
So do you anticipate in March or June, is there going to be a vote up or down by the supervisors? When would that vote happen?
The final vote up or down would be in June.
Okay. And how many members of that 11-member body would have to vote yes for the approval of the $5 million?
So in order for it to be, veto proof from the mayor, they would need 8 votes. 6 votes gets it passed out of the 11, but then it would not, the mayor could potentially come back and say, I want it to be changed, or I'm not going to approve it because of X, Y, and Z. I think the other challenge is around like, where does the money come from? Because clearly, depending on how many people they're going to pay out, like, is this X amount every year, or is it trying to hit all the people that qualify in one year? So a lot of that will still have to be fine-tuned over the next few months.
All right, Melanie, I want to bring you into this conversation. I'm sure you've been tracking what's happening in San Francisco. What was your initial reaction when you saw the preliminary recommendations from this task force, this committee, for $5 million for reparations?
I have to tell you, as someone who works on public policy for a living, I was first stunned by we didn't use math, we used the journey. I was like, what? I mean, my master's is in public administration, and I'm like, I know we did not. I didn't do any public policy projects on a journey when I was dealing with numbers. I was like so perplexed by that. And then the other thing I was thinking is, where is all this money going to come from? Are they going to deduct if you also were the beneficiary of some public monies in the past, public housing, welfare, all of the other things? Because I mean, you got to balance it out, right? So you're benefiting from, you're getting paid back, but then, there's a narrative, and a thought that the reason why Black people are poor is, why they have to be on, some have to be on welfare and some, whatever the situation is, use public services. That part of that is due to racism. So will that amount of money be deducted? Also, will you be able to ever use those services again? Like if you're $5 million up, like I feel like we're even and we should be even for a minute. Like, does that mean that everybody in your family for however long, you should be good to go if you get 5 million? So should you be able to get student loans? Should you have any kinds of advantages for starting a business as a minority if you get this $5 million? All of the things that come with that. It was when I was reading about it from just strictly from a practical policy perspective, it was making my head spin. I have all kinds of questions. Will this come with some required financial literacy? There's a pretty well-known statistic about people who win the lottery, for example, typically end up broke because they don't know how to manage their money properly. Will that be a requirement? Will people who are already wealthy qualify for that? Or wealthy Black people in San Francisco who are already perhaps millionaires or even thousandaires, will they qualify for that $5 million?
You raised some good... These are excellent questions, Melanie. And in full disclosure, everyone knows that watches this show or watches me on TV know I am a reparations avid supporter. I'm actually also a civil rights lawyer, and I'm actually representing some families in Palm Springs, over 6,000 families who are seeking reparations from the city of Palm Springs. So I fully and wholeheartedly support reparations from a moral standpoint and a legal standpoint. And I did get concerned, like Melanie Sherrill, when I read that the head of the committee said we didn't use math, we used a journey. And I'm very concerned that that statement and that process could harm other reparations actions, which are taking place, as you know, all over the country, from Palm Springs, the case I'm involved in, to Detroit, to Sacramento, Boston, Massachusetts, St. Louis, Missouri, Memphis, Tennessee. There are reparations commissions and committees that have been formed all over this country. Does that do harm to our efforts if we come forth with what someone's going to say, well, it's a journey, you just pulled it out your pocket, you pulled it out your hat, you pulled it out your butt, you pulled it out of somewhere, and it's not scientific.
Right.
Does that concern you, Cheryl?
So I think, and I would say, I think hopefully he was taken out of context or maybe misunderstood what the question was, because, we are in the place right now. We're working with Stanford Law School. We're also working with a researcher to actually document that. But we are starting from this place of, the average house in San Francisco, to even purchase a condo in San Francisco, an 800 square foot condo, is over $1 million. So again, focusing on the idea and notion of reparations, starting from just getting housed, that first space is already at a $2 million out the door if we're talking about a house that has more than one bedroom in it. So that's one place. The second place is around, if we're talking about education, if we're talking about health, we're talking about, so there are numbers that go with that. And there is a very specific piece that outlines, right, this is what we know was lost in terms of if we had to replace in the name of reparations, if we were today going to take a family that was displaced during that era, during that time, what that looks like. And to the point of, we've had this conversation back and forth around financial literacy or financial coaching and what that looks like. And there's been a lot of debate about what that looks like for the community by and large and what we require of folks. But that ultimately we are saying to fill the gap, right? Like this is not even meant to fill the gap, right? Like there's a whole other piece of that. This is about repairing the harm that was lost. We know in San Francisco that there were 10,000 folks that were displaced during redevelopment era. Of those 10,000, 8,000 plus of them were Black. And we also know that half of them never came back to the city because they couldn't afford to do it. And so what would it take to get those folks to come back to the city? And then also, what is the harm that was done to the folks that were displaced? So
Right.
there are numbers to it. And unfortunately, he didn't get the chance, or maybe there was confusion to communicate those.
Well, first of all, I'm glad to hear that. And I want to, I hope those numbers get out and get out quickly, because I think those folks who are supportive of reparations want to feel like they have, some numbers, some statistics, some data, something to support the efforts, because as you said, $5 million sounds like a big number, but those of us that live in California know that $5 million in places like Silicon Valley and San Francisco and some places in Los Angeles won't even buy you a home, won't buy in some of these communities even just a basic family home, 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom family home, unfortunately, because the cost of real estate is so high. So it sounds large, and people are responding, I think, to the largeness of that number. But when you start getting into those numbers and showing what the cost of real estate is, and showing what the cost of, what it costs for education and et cetera, and the generational wealth that has been lost by Black folks as a result of racist policies, that number doesn't sound so large at all. And in fact, it's probably an inadequate, a woefully inadequate number. But let me address something you said, Melanie, about the financial coaching. White folks get to spend their money however they want to spend it. Now, I'm all in favor of financial literacy. I'm all in favor of folks being responsible with their money, but I am not in favor of the oppressor telling the oppressed what to do with the money. If you took my money, if you took my property, and I'm asking you to give it back to me, what I do with it when you give it back to me is not your business. If I want to go to Vegas and put it all in a slot machine on one day, that is my business. If I want to buy a house or invest in a business, that is my business. The oppressor doesn't get to tell the oppressed, i.e. us Black folks, what to do with our money. Now, of course, we want to make financial literacy available for folks. We want to make, supportive coaching. All of that should be available, but it should not be mandatory, and it should not be tied to the money. Because when white folks took our stuff, they got to do whatever the hell they wanted to do with our stuff. So let's not cause Black folks to be given requirements and regulations and, that other folks don't have. Go ahead, Melanie, jump in. You got 30 seconds. Then we got to.
I got 3 seconds.
Traffic and sports.
Well, listen.
I'll give you more on the other side, Melanie, but go ahead.
Okay. I get what you're saying, but it is for their benefit. And I just don't, as someone who taught financial literacy on a high school level for 12 years, I don't consider the financial strategies to be oppressive. It is, financial education is actually the key to financial success and generational wealth. If kids start when they're 18 to understand the basics of financial
Hold
literacy,
that thought for me, Melanie. I swear I'm going to let you finish your thought on the other side after news, sports, and traffic. Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580. I'm also